I've put together a detailed study guide on this on my Educational Hub website, covering the subject in considerably more depth. Check the link in the description and comments. If there's one thing modern criticism has taught us about medieval literature, it's that it's a lot more sophisticated than we might have expected. I've already talked about the layers of complexity in Sir Gawain and the Green Knight, and in this video I'm going to focus on Chaucer's satirical portraits of religious figures in the Canterbury Tales. There's the debauched friar who spends his time drinking and womanizing, the wealthy monk who prefers hunting to good works, the fraudulent pardoner who sells fake religious relics, and the sexually charged prioress, who's the main focus of this video. But the real story here is not that Chaucer took an ironical view of the clergy. What's really interesting is the fact that for a century or more his irony was lost. Chaucer was writing in the 14th century and his intentions were no doubt clear to people at that time. Somehow though, by the Victorian period, many people, scholars and regular readers alike, were approaching the Canterbury Tales straight, completely missing the satire. That's something I'll talk about in a separate video with special reference to a particular individual who I think plays a much more important role than he's generally given credit for in modern scholarship. For now though, let me get down to reading the relevant section from the Canterbury Tales. It's not a terribly long section, but I'll break it down into 3 parts with a discussion of each one in turn.
There was also a nun, a prioress, that of her smelling was full simple and coy. Her greatest oath was but Besint loy, and she was clepped Madame Eglantyne. Full well she sung the service divine, intuned in her nose full simile, and French she spak full fair and fetisly, after the school of Stratford at the bow, for French of Paris was to hear unknown. At Meta well taught was she withal, she let no morsel from her lips fall, ne wet her fingers in her sauce dip. Well could she carry a morsel, and well keep, that no drop ne fell upon her breast. In courtesy was set full muchel her list. Her overlip whipped she so clean, that in her cup there was no farthing sin of grace, when she drunken had her draught.
Okay, let's just pause here a moment and look at what we've got. The prioress's beautiful singing voice, her table manners, her graceful bearing, and the French she learned at school. Even her name. All these things mark her out, or seem to mark her out, as an elegant and refined lady. But how would she have been seen by Chaucer's contemporaries? It's almost as hard for us to imagine what life was like in Chaucer's time as it would have been for the people of those days to imagine our life now. But if we want to get some kind of understanding, we really need to look at the role played by religion in the lives of medieval people. If you'd been living in those days, you probably wouldn't have got anything very much at all in the way of education. But if you did, it would almost certainly have come from the church. You probably wouldn't have had any books at all. But if you did have one, again, it would almost certainly have been a book connected with the church, a book of hours, that is, prayers to be read at various times during the day. The church would have taken 10% of everything you earned or produced. Your holidays were, quite literally, holy days, and many forms of entertainment, mystery plays, miracle plays, morality plays, were essentially religious in nature. The church, both as a building and as an institution, lay at the heart of every community. Obviously, in a society where religion plays such a central part, people would know what holy orders involved. As a Benedictine nun, Madame Eglantyne had taken solemn vows of poverty, chastity and obedience. And the Benedictine rule was very specific about what those vows required in daily life. A nun was supposed to live in the seclusion of her convent, not go gallivanting around the countryside, even on pilgrimage. She was supposed to sing in a plain, sincere way, in honour of God, not in a self-consciously beautiful way. The Prioress has learned, fashionably, to speak a bit of French, but we hear nothing of her devotion to God. Instead, we get a long description of her table manners. Even her name is a bit of a joke. Like her convent school French, it implies aspirations to courtliness rather than actual aristocratic connections. For Chaucer's contemporaries, the Prioress is an obvious travesty of what a truly religious person should be. And he's only just getting started.
Full semele after Hermeta she rachte. And sickerly she was of great disport, and full pleasant and amiable of port, and pained her to contrefeit cheer of court, and ben estatlich of manner, and to ben holden digne of reverence. But for to specken of her conscience, she was so charitable and so piteous, she would weep if that she saw a mouse caught in a trap, if it were dead or bled. Of small hounds had she, that she fed with roasted flesh or milk and wastel bread, but sore wept she if one of him were dead, or if men smote it with a yerde smert. And all was conscience and tendre heart.
Chaucer continues here to drive home the point about the Prioress's manners and deportment. Her counterfeiture of court reinforces the idea that she emulates rather than exemplifies the good breeding of the gentry, while her desire to be holden digne of reverence shows that rather than devoting her life to God, she seeks to be looked up to and admired by others. Chaucer then moves on to talk about her conscience. This really is where he drives the irony home. In a society where most of the population lived under the threat of famine, disease, plague and war, Madame Eglantyne's charitable and piteous impulses are directed towards a mouse caught in a trap. This was more than just weak sentimentality. In a world where human suffering was widespread and constant, the people turned to the church for relief. The fact that no mention is made of the prioress caring for the suffering poor implies a serious dereliction of her duty as a nun. And then there are her dogs. She shouldn't have had them at all. We know from the monastic records that the keeping of pets in nunneries was prohibited again and again, and just as often ignored by nuns like Madame Eglantyne. There she is, feeding them on the best roasted meat with milk and fine bread, while many are going hungry. And that last line, all was conscience and tendre herte, simply drips with irony.
Full simile, her wimple pinched was, her nose tretis, her een grey as glass, her mouth full small, and thereto soft and red, but secretly she had a fair forehead. It was almost a span broad I trow, for hardily she was not undergrow. Full fettis was her cloak, as he was wore, of small coral about her arm she bar a pair of beads, gauded all with grain, and thereon hang a brooch of gold full sheen, on which there was first writ a crowned A, and after amor vincit omnia.
Every detail of the nun's appearance is replete with sexual innuendo, using the language of courtly romance. The description builds up from her pretty nose, her grey eyes, her soft red lips and her broad forehead, a mark of erotic beauty in the courtly love tradition, to the wonderful line, for hardily she was not undergrow, which is basically how he tells us that she has big breasts, without telling us she has big breasts. The details of the prioress's cloak and prayer beads spell out her disregard of the vow of poverty she took when she became a nun. And finally, there's that brooch with its amor vincit omnia, love conquers all, a phrase used by Virgil to refer to the erotic love between a man and a woman, making it clear that behind her simple and coy smile, the prioress's thoughts are very far from the chastity required by her holy orders. It's this use of implication, telling us without telling us, that gives the description of the prioress its power. But unless readers know what was expected of a nun in those days, they may not realise that behind the apparent admiration, Chaucer is ripping her to pieces. And that, the story of how Chaucer's irony got lost over the years, is the story I'll be telling in the follow-up to this video, with special reference, as I said before, to the role of one figure who has been largely overlooked in modern scholarship. Thank you for watching. If you're interested in more poetry videos, I've made hundreds of them. Be sure to subscribe to the channel, turn on notifications for new stuff, and check the playlists for evergreen oldies. If you want even more material, visit my Educational Hub website.